All right. Hi, everyone, to another week of ethics. This week, we are going to be talking about egoism and hedonism. So remember that ethics is this question of what should I do? And we've looked at two ways of doing ethics, normative and applied. Up until now, all of these case studies that we've done, the trolley problem, sweatshops, lying as clinicians, euthanasia, all of that has been applied ethics. I've looked at this question, what should I do, and said, here is a case with interesting implications. What should you do? We're turning now for the rest of this course, for the most part, to look at normative ethics. I put those things in brackets, put them to the side because we're going to look at them later and it's going to be important at the end of the class. But in terms of content that we have left, most of what we need to do is about this thing, normative ethics, right? Applied ethics was looking at that question, what should I do, and looking at case studies or looking at disciplines. Normative ethics wants to tell you the norm of behavior or the thing you should always do. What should I do in all cases? Okay? How does it do that? Moral theories. Moral theories. That is what we're going to spend time looking at now. The two readings were on egoism and hedonism. The two lectures are going to be called Egoism and Hedonism, right? Those are moral theories. We are in the domain of normative ethics now. We have moral theories about what we should do in the world. These are theories that try to tell you, what should I do? In all cases, here's what you should do. If you have any interest about what moral theories are, there was an optional reading. It's about 20 pages long, so I didn't require it. I know last week was super heavy. Looking at the philosophy of what moral theories are. And that's available to you if you ever go on to take higher level ethics classes, moral philosophy, advanced ethics. There's going to be a reading like that in there. But I actually thought from our second reading on hedonism, and this is the egoism lecture, so if you haven't read the hedonism reading, that's fine. But Schoeffer Landau, who I respect as a writer, I think his book is incredible. He defines these things incredibly, and that's why I have integrated his book into this class. I love this book. He offers us a great definition about what moral theories are, that for our purposes, I'm just going to use in this class. We don't need to think too philosophically about what these theories are, I don't believe, because I think it's more important that you are answering the ethics questions of what should I do and interacting with what other people say, more so than actually thinking about what it is you're doing when you do that. If you still want to look at that question, that reading's there, it's available to you, okay? So I said, Schoeffer Landau offered a great definition in the second reading, the hedonism reading, that we're going to use in this class to define what it is that moral theories are or are doing. So before I talk about our first theory, which was egoism, I'm going to quickly go to that second reading, tell you what he said, and then come back to this first reading on egoism, okay? So what are moral theories? Well, Schoeffer Landau says there are two types of reasons you should do something. You should do things that are good, right? So the things that you should do because it's the good thing or the right thing to do. But things can be good intrinsically or instrumentally, okay? What does that mean? Let's start with the second one, instrumentally good. If I asked you, why are you in this class? Most of you are going to tell me it was required for my degree. I needed to take a class. I wanted a GPA booster. I thought this was an interesting topic, whatever. The reason of what should I do, I should take ethics came forward was probably instrumental to some other reason. Why do you want to succeed in this class? Because I want to get on the dean's list. Why do you want to get on the dean's list? Because I want to perform well in college. Why do you want to perform well in college? I want an honors degree. Why do you want an honors degree? That might get me into a better bachelor's program. Why do you want a bachelor's degree? Because it's going to give me a good paying job. Why do you want a good paying job? Because I want to support myself and my kids or my partner or whatever. I had a goal, succeeding in this class, that was relevant to some other goal. And this went up a chain until eventually I got to something that was a principle, right? Which was I should support myself and support people who depend on me, right? There were goals that went up until something was there that just seemed like the thing I should do in all cases. Succeeding in this class was only good because it helped me get on the dean's list, right? That is why succeeding in this class was good, or it helped me get a good grade or a GPA boost, or it helped me demonstrate mastery over the skills, whatever. The grade itself was not valuable. I shouldn't just get A's because I can just get A's. A's are valuable because they mean something. What do they mean? Mastery over content, ability to succeed in college environments, ability to it means something, or it tells the person looking at the A something about themselves, right? So it does go on a sort of journey of meaning. But eventually our journeys sort of stop in places. Those stopping points are intrinsically good. Things that are intrinsically good are good because, by definition, that's what good things are. Something that is intrinsically good is something that couldn't possibly be anything but good. It is just by its definition what a good thing is, right? Instrumental goods are instruments we use to help us achieve goals chasing down that bigger intrinsic good. Ethics might be intrinsically good. Asking yourself what you should do might be intrinsically good. But the A in the class is probably a tool for you to some other goal that you have. Even if that's getting an ethics degree, like getting an A in Intro to Ethics is an instrument you are going to use, a tool you are going to use to get up to that master's degree in ethics, right? So things are good because they help us achieve goals, or because they're the thing all of our goals are trying to do. You might want to get your bachelor's degree because you want to be educated, because you think being educated is good, because you want to get a good job, because you think making money is good for some reason, because you think that it demonstrates to people you're a hard worker. Whatever you decided you want to come to college, or you're taking college classes, is your reason, that's fine. But eventually there are these principles that we sort of just seem to think are like things we should do, right? Schoeffer Landau says moral theories are theories about identifying what is intrinsically good in the world. That this is what we are trying to do with our moral theories. Moral theories, which answer the question, what should I do in any possible case? They give you the tool to understand what you should do in any case before you. How do they do that? They tell you what is intrinsically good and ask you to say, if that is what is intrinsically good, if that is the thing that brings value to my actions, how can I seek that goal, this ultimate goal, in my action right now? That is what a theory of morality is doing. So now we turn to egoism, which is the subject of this lecture. Egoism identifies the intrinsic good as my own self interest. So let's look at this at work. Egoism is the theory that I should do whatever is in my own self interest. My own self interest, according to egoism, is intrinsically good. How does that work in practice? When I ask the question, what should I do? If I'm an egoist, my moral theory says, what should I do? Whatever is in my own self interest. I'll demonstrate this each time we're looking at a new idea, but that is what theories are doing. This is what normative ethics is. It's creating an answer, all of those little cases we looked at of what should I do. Now, we're looking at egoism. There are very few philosophers who are what are called egoists or ethical egoists. Most famous egoist the reading mentioned is Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was a thinker in the 20th century who really is like the preeminent philosopher in egoism. She is also an economist. She is a writer. She is a fascinating woman. And she really pushed egoism and is its most acknowledged defender in the world of philosophy. She's the philosopher most responsible for the preeminence of egoism. So I had to give you a reading from the perspective of someone who is biased against egoism. That is worth mentioning because whenever you read someone, you have to know their bias. Our author is not an egoist. He does not think egoism is rational. He tells you in the reading, I am not an egoist, and I don't think it's the correct opinion about the world. But I think he does an excellent job defining what egoism is. But egoism is this idea that the thing, the ultimate end of all of our goals, remember this chain, the thing at the end is my own self interest. And he says, well, here's an example. This is the author. Let's say you budgeted everything out this month and you had an extra $10. You had money that you could spin around with. And let's say you decide with your $10 to go buy a coffee. I'm going to go to the cafe. I'm going to get myself a nice cup of coffee. I'm going to splurge. I'm going to get all of the things, and it's going to cost me $10. And I'm going to go buy this coffee. Why did you decide to spend your money to go buy a coffee? Our author here says something like, well, it's kind of weird. Usually we tell ourselves that we have obligations to one another. When people hear me say we should pursue our own self-interest, the reason why a lot of people think this is unintuitive is because they feel like I have certain obligations to other people. But in this example the author gives us of an extra $10 you decide to spend on coffee, that $10 could have been given to a famine relief agency and fed family for a year. But you decided to buy a coffee. And it actually, when we went through that example, like, it doesn't seem extreme to us that you would decide to buy a coffee. It actually seems perfectly reasonable to most of us, if you had an extra $10 and you've been working really hard, that you could just go buy a coffee and splurge on yourself one time. And that one-time splurge is not a bad thing. But if you have obligations to other people, that is, if you had obligations to people as a matter of fact, that you just have obligations to others, you would expect that you would actually spend your money in things like that famine relief example. You could help someone so much, like you could feed them and their family for a year, and you chose instead to buy a coffee. What does that say about our behaviors? What does it really say about our behaviors? That when I gave you the example, you had 10 extra dollars, it didn't seem radical or extreme that you decided to buy a coffee, did it? You probably knew that $10 could have gone and fed someone. Maybe it won't feed them for a year, but you could have at least changed someone's life with that $10. You could have literally changed what it meant to be that person with that $10, but it still didn't seem extreme to you that the person in our example decided to go buy a coffee. Well, why is that? Egoism exists, the author explains, in two realms. When I took intro to psychology, actually, my psychology professor talked about this, and I thought that was super cool. Psychological egoism is the belief that in our brains, psychologically, we are always pursuing our own self-interest. Lots of people believe this, actually. A lot of people in psychology think we might tell ourselves we're doing things to help other people, but really, we understand it as helping our survival. You might have heard the idea survival of the fittest. Well, some psychologists say we exist in a social society. So at times, it is actually in your best interest to help other people survive, or now in modern society, achieve their goals. Because if we all play together and we cooperate, we actually might do bigger and greater things, right? So psychologically, we might be wired to pursue our own self-interest. But if suddenly no one's looking, we might be psychologically wired to do a thing in normal circumstances we couldn't do. If I could steal money and I knew no one would ever catch me and there would never be any ramifications, there's no way they would ever know I stole that money. People who are psychological egoists say we would steal that money. The only reason we don't is because we think for some reason we might get caught, and that being caught stealing money has some ramification that is not in our self-interest. And so we weigh our decisions and we do whatever it is that in the long term will help our own self-interest. Why do you take care of children? It is in your self-interest that those genes go on. You are able to continue after death through your lineage. Why do you make romantic gestures to a partner? Because you want to woo them so you can reproduce, right? The whole world under psychological egoism is you doing whatever you can to get ahead. And your brain might tell you that you're doing things for the sake of other people. But that's because it understands doing those things is actually a way of helping yourself. Ethical egoism, though, turns and says something even stronger, which is not only the sheer fact is everyone is looking out for themselves. It says something stronger, which is not only do people only look out for themselves at the end of the day, you really should only be looking out for yourself at the end of the day. See the difference there? There's one that says, maybe people should be better and we should get over our psychology. And people might believe our psychology tells us to pursue our own self interest, but we have moral obligations to fight that. Ethical egoism is saying embrace the fact that you should only be looking out for yourself because you should be only looking out for yourself. That's not a glitch in our psychology. That is a thing that we are obliged to do. Ayn Rand talks about this. She says, it might appear that you are doing things that help other people, but if you really thought about why you were doing it, you actually gain something. If you're at a crosswalk and you saw a bike coming and some girl is going to get hit by that bike and you push her out of the way and put yourself in the line of danger, you might do that because you want to be a hero and have some fantasy or delusion about people thinking you're heroic. She thinks that's what's really happening. She doesn't think it's selfless at all. It's really about you. And if it wasn't about you, you wouldn't do it. The first argument in favor of egoism is the belief that altruism is self-defeating. Self-defeating might also be understood as a word contradictory. And altruism refers to the idea of caring for others, to pursue what is good for others. So the first idea is that altruism is always self-defeating. If you believe everyone's just looking out for themselves in the world, and you decide to look out for someone else, they're busy looking out for themselves. Who's looking out for you? It's a dark thought, but this is what an egoist would say. Everyone else you ever meet is at the end of the day looking for themselves, and they might be your friend, or they might be polite to you, or you might interact with them. When push comes to shove, they're looking out for their own self-interest, is what the egoist is saying, right? If you make any decision that's helping them instead of yourself, no one's looking out for you. It would be impossible for me to look out for other people because if I was looking out for other people, no one was looking out for me. The next thing that Ayn Rand says that our reader presents by summarizing her work is, only I know what I need. I knew with my extra $10 that I wanted a coffee and I wanted it made this certain way. I don't know what that family that will receive the famine assistance needs. Who am I to say what they need? I only know what I, Sir Robert Rossing, need, is what Shea would say if he was an egoist. An egoist believes only you can know what you need. Only I have the ability to get in my mind and know that that would be my self-interest. So if you try to help me and assert your idea of what I need onto me, you're creating, Ayn Rand and egoists believe at large, you are doing something wrong. I know what I need. I know my brain. You don't. So who should make the decision about what I need? It's me. The last point made in favor of egoism is that it's impossible charity can be anything other than self-interested. Why is that? When you give someone charity, egoists believe you, by definition, degrade them because you stake their self-interest, their existence, on your willingness to give them charity. The relationship of charity, then, if this is you and this is the person you're giving charity to, is you are giving them something and now suddenly they depend on you. They are less human, they're less of an agent, they have less of an ability to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue because they depend on you, the person who gave them charity. This act is always degrading, right? Individuals should be able to pursue their self-interest first. That is what the egoist believes. That is the most important thing. But if they depend on you to pursue their own self-interest, or on society, if they depend on communities, on groups, whatever it is, if they depend on anyone, they become less of a human and individual, is what the egoist believes. Because they can't pursue their self-interest. They can't pursue what is intrinsically good because now they depend on the person giving them charity. And why does that person give them charity? It is in their self-interest to be on the top. It is in their self-interest to have people depend on them. It is in their interest to control others. That is why egoists believe charity happen. And it would be impossible to help someone without degrading them in this way. Therefore, charity and altruism is impossible. It is always self-interested, according to the egoist. The author then shares an Ayn Rand quote, which I think is interesting, where Ayn Rand says something like, people say so much about what egoists are and and say that they are narcissistic, sociopathic, what have you. But Ayn Rand says, you only have this life. And egoists are the only people who recognize the value of life. Because when given the opportunity to exist in the world, you pursued what was in the interest of the life you were given. At the end of the day, you're just looking out for yourself. If you don't think you are, you're lying to yourself. And really, you should be looking out for yourself. Because if you didn't look out for yourself, who was going to? If you thought you had to do things for other people, well, no one's going to be looking out for you, and they're going to stab you in the back. It's always self-defeating. And who are you to say what those people need anyway? Really, what's happening there is you want them to depend on you. You want to prove that you're better than them, and you're degrading them as individuals. You can see how this idea actually, a rational person can believe this. What are the arguments against? The major one the author calls the counter argument from wickedness, which is that in those cases, you could imagine being able to kill someone, a random human, and let's say you knew for a matter of fact you would be able to kill them and get away with it and nothing would ever happen to you. It feels wicked to suggest that really, if you took some pleasure from killing them, you would ever be justified in doing it. Why? Well, what should I do? Other people who are not egoists, who don't answer the question of what is intrinsically good with my own self-interest, they have better accounts of the world, they think. But that first counter-argument is from wickedness, and it even might mean, historically this has had a religious connotation. There are people who are members of religions who just believe that there are things that are wicked or sinful or wrong. And to pursue your own self-interest over everything else is considered inherently wicked under those worldviews. The other counterargument is that the definition of self-interest is too arbitrary. What do you mean, your self-interest? What's in your self-interest? Is in your self-interest to take care of kids? You carry on your genes, so what? You're not going to be around for your genes to propagate in the world. It's not like by your genes continuing in your children, you continue to exist. So then why do we have kids and take care of kids? Really, you should only think about yourself then, right? Or at least after you have kids, if it is about continuing your genes, why live till old age? Or, what is in your self-interest? If at the end of the day, in society, it is in your self-interest to play along with the rules of society, then you're distorting what the word self-interest means. You're just looking at an obligation you have to another person and telling a story that it's really about yourself, right? Egoists, on this view, are bending the word self-interest to mean whatever it is that you already are obliged to do. The last counter-argument is that this is not a practical social theory. What this means is there could never be a purely egoist society. Our author told us to imagine there's a Democrat and there's a Republican. And this is demonstrating the idea, it's not really political. But that for some reason the Democrat wants to kill the Republican and the Republican wants to prevent the Democrat from killing them. Those two people have two different goals. And it is in the self-interest of the Democrat to kill the Republican, but it is also in the self-interest of the Republican to prevent the Democrat from killing them. And you could imagine some societies where you would want your opponent to be silenced in this way. You cannot have a social theory where both people get to have their own self-interest. Someone's self-interest has to lose. Either the thing which was in the self-interest of the Democrat that was killing the Republican won't happen, or the Republican won't be able to stop the Democrat from killing them. But it's not possible for all people in society to always get what's in their self-interest. Because if everyone was, there would be these conundrums where, well, I want to kill you, but you don't want me to kill you, so someone has to lose. We couldn't possibly have a society where we all pursued our own self-interest. That's egoism, okay?